Alright. Although I did say that I didn't have time to make any videos this week, somehow I managed to squeeze 3 hours out from doing all my homework yesterday night, and here I am, making a pre-release guide for Nilou as she is coming out next Friday on the 14th. I'm also going to be talking about my opinion on what the developers of Genshin Impact have said recently during an interview that I'm sure most of you guys who really pay attention to Genshin Impact news should be aware of. So first of all, let's start with talking about what sort of character Nilou is briefly, just to make sure that everyone watching from this point onwards will find it easier to understand why I think building her in a certain way is the best for her. As we all know, Nilou is a Hydro character whose playstyle is mainly centered around the bloom reaction because of her passive. She is also a character whose elemental skill and burst both scale off of HP, in which her elemental skill has its own separate scaling from her normal attack, and so you don't really have to level up her normal attack. You can press her E 3 times or press it once and then normal attack, with each attack pattern benefiting Nilou and the team in different ways. But one common thing about her E is that during its duration, regardless of which state Nilou is in, her normal attacks will be infused with Hydro, and she won't be able to perform charged attacks. I'll talk about her E in more detail when she's out, so please bear with me for this video. As for her burst, it's more simple, and basically it deals a big instance of Hydro damage and applies an effect on enemies that are hit and deals Hydro damage periodically. When it comes to her passive talents, her first one converts all bloom cores created into her own unique bountiful cores, in which they deal more damage and explode faster. One thing to remember is that this can only happen when all characters in the party are either Dendro or Hydro. This also means that the bountiful cores can't be further interacted with to produce hyper bloom or burgeon reactions. As for her final talent, it simply buffs the damage dealt by the bountiful cores based on Nilou's max HP. Now that her kit has been summarized, let's look at what sort of artifact set you can run on her. I'd say that there are many options out there for her, as she is not going to be receiving a unique artifact set as of 3.1, and so let's start from the artifact set that you can run on her but wouldn't necessarily be the best option. The 4-piece emblem set can be great on her if you're planning on using her as a support, as the damage of her burst will be increased, but at the same time, if you're planning on using her as more of a main slash sub DPS, then it's best to use other sets as a large portion of her damage output comes from her E. Also, as Nilou's kit greatly scales off of HP, running 2-piece tenacity with another 2-piece is also great for Nilou, especially if you want to play her as a support and as a main slash sub DPS. You can either run 2-piece Heart of Deaths or 2-piece Gullet Dreams or 2-piece Wanderer's Troop, as they have the same 2-piece bonus, since EM is also needed as her bountiful cores benefit from EM a lot because of how it's a type of reaction, but still, the main stat that you should be looking for is HP %, regardless of what sort of playstyle you plan to play Nilou with. For substats, crit damage and crit rate as usual would be nice, and you should also look for EM and HP %. Of course, the main stat of her Sands should be HP %, and for the circlet it should be crit rate or crit damage depending on which one you need more of. Personally, I think for a support Nilou, HP % Goblet is better, but for a main slash sub DPS Nilou, 100% Goblet is better. If you want to pull for Nilou but are unsure of how you want to play her, I'll show the difference between a support and a DPS Nilou's damage when she comes out in another video, and hopefully that will help you out. Alright, weapon options for Nilou. First thing first, her signature weapon, the baseball bat, is of course her best in slot, but there are also other very good options available currently that you can also use on her if you don't want to pull for her weapon. Let's talk about the baseball bat first. Its main stat is HP % with a whooping 66% at level 90. Its passive gives EM to Nilou and other characters after her E hits an enemy. The Jade Cutter can also help with solving her crit ratio issues, but I'm not sure whether Nilou can fully utilize the passive as it gives an attack bonus which Nilou doesn't really need, but nevertheless it's still a good option. I would say all the 5-star swords except maybe the Mist Splitter, Alatos weapon and the Jade Cutter won't fit her well, as she's such a niche character with a really niche need of certain stats, in which giving her a fantastic support 5-star weapon like the Freedom Sworn would be low-key a waste on her, and another character would probably perform better and benefit the team better than her as a support with that weapon. Constellation wise, C1 or C2 should be the stopping point for those who are considering pulling for a few constellations, depending on how much your card can handle. You guys know what C3 and C5 do respectively, so I'm not going to go over them, but C4 gives Nilou some energy after pressing her E for the 3rd time, and also buffs your burst damage, which is pretty nice but is by no means necessary in my opinion. And finally, C6 provides Nilou with crit rate and crit damage based on her max HP, which enables her to be a much smoother DPS to play with. But as always, please spend your money wisely and sensibly, and please don't feel pressured by this video or any of my previous Nilou videos to pull for her. It's your account, it's your Primogems, so ultimately it's your own decision. Last but not least, I'll put her Ascension Materials on screen right now. I don't think her mats are that hard to farm for except for maybe the random boss drop, but to be honest, it's not that hard to defeat, so hopefully you'll be able to finish farming for her before her release on next Friday the 14th. And now, let's talk about some sad things that I've heard lately. I would have made a separate video on this matter if I hadn't gotten so much homework, but either way, I'm going to quickly address my personal thoughts and opinion on the recent interview with Genshin Impact's devs. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything and I'll get straight to the point. I'm very disappointed at the fact that, essentially, they will never add any other new form of permanent endgame content besides the existing Spiral Abyss in the future. The thing is, I sort of guessed that this was going to be the case as the game lately, as in over the past few updates, has felt very orientated towards a casual playstyle, with each update bringing in new types of minigames in the shape of events. I'm not that bothered by it, as I'd say I'm a casual player myself, based on the simple fact that I just don't have the time to grind for artifacts anymore, nor do bosses and all that constantly. I definitely got lucky when I first started the game, and I've done some grinding here and there every now and again, but that's really it. The reason why I'd say I'm disappointed is because sometimes when I do find the time to play Genshin Impact for an hour or two, it can sometimes get boring after completing your dailies and spending your resin, and I really had hoped that other than the Spiral Abyss, something else would be introduced to at least alleviate the board. Even though I don't really care about it that much, there is still quite a substantial portion of the community that really cares about it, as in the combat side of the game and most importantly about the endgame side of the game. Their opinions should be heard and should be listened to, and I think HoYoverse might have messed up a tiny bit this time. 3.1 Phase 2 is right around the corner, and to those Nilou wanters out there, good luck, and I personally will also be pulling for her next Friday, and I'll make sure to post a video on that as soon as possible. Other than that, please like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe, as it really helps me out, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!